how's your day going so far, aside from, talking about yourself a lot and that kind of a thing?
Well, it's nice overcast weather, so I'm always enjoying a little bit of cool air and just freshen up the perspective as we go through our lives. It's important to take these moments to just take it in.
Sure. So the latest project that we are allowed to know about, because oftentimes a composer has three jobs going on and only one has been announced. So the latest one that we really know about is Chef's Table Legends. And you go back about 10 years on this project. Am I correct?
That is correct. Yes, this is my with the completion of the Jose Andres episode, it was my 30th one for the series. I calculated maybe around 40 hours of music written and 10
Oh,
years of time. Yeah, which has been a fantastic journey. And I've got to work with so many amazing filmmakers and tell the stories of so many inspiring chefs over the years. So it's been a real incredible privilege for me to have been on the series for so long.
when you got the first one, was it a one-off? Did you think it was a one-off?
It's a great, yeah. It's funny to think back to that. I had no idea. I just remember my dear friend Clay, who I've worked with on many episodes for the series, had called me in and said, "Hey, do you want to come down to the edit bay and check out this documentary we're making?" And I was pretty green at that time. I was
Hmm.
fresh out of school. I didn't have a lot of professional experience, and I was hungry. I was passionate, but I hadn't done a lot at that point. Like a few things for friends, basically. And I got to the edit bay, and I remember seeing the footage and being like, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible!" What
Hmm.
they were in Argentina, and there was storms, and there was this beautiful mountains and cooking outside, and this crazy guy who was had all these dreams and poetry to recite, and it was just a fantastic um, place to land and go, okay, I this is my moment. This is an opportunity for me to really kind of synthesize a lot of my influences and loves of different kinds of music. And so it was pretty great. It was pretty great.
So you sort of answered something I was very curious about, which is how much footage or how much of the final product, aside from the music, are you working with when you're composing First Chef's Table?
Um, Yeah, I mean it's like a rolling edit, so that's sort of a term of art for the film is being made as I come in, and but largely there is a pretty good sense of how the story is going to go, and some details may change and scenes may change place, but we do have a good sense of where the narrative arc for a particular chef is going to go, and it's my job to start writing and adapting the music in some
Hmm.
cases based on what happens in that editorial process. So sometimes I have to rewrite music. Sometimes things go away that um, I've done, and sometimes music that I've written is an inspiration to an editor,
Hmm.
and they say, "Oh, I would love to recut a scene. Now that I've heard this, I could kind of imagine this working in this really interesting way." And so I've had a few moments where there's time where that's even happened, where the kind of scoring and editorial process have been much more in sync in a way that's really fun to see how that collision of ideas can happen, you know?
Yeah, well, going back to another thing that you said, use the word influences. And these days, I'm finding a lot of the top tier composers, and yes, I called you a top tier composer. Is that okay with you, Duncan, that I
I
did that?
am I am honored, and one day I will feel like I'm not an imposter, but I'm not sure
No.
I'm there yet.
Imposter syndrome happens at every level, but I'm finding these days that you never know the background of a composer. These days, sometimes they're people who are in major label bands. Sometimes they were the people who moved their way up from the musician's assistant who was Xeroxing the sheet music to work their way up. Sometimes it's all that they wanted to do was work in the classical space, etc. So, were you ever a garage band guy?
Uh, definitely. That is my original background. I used to have dyed pink hair, and I played in a punk band when I was a teenager, and another version of a punk band when I was in my 20s too. And I've taught music. I've tried and failed to be a jazz guitarist at one point. I've produced stuff for myself. I played in touring bands. I did a whole bunch of random things, and that's kind of the fun part of becoming a composer is it's really allowed me to collect all of these experiences and put them into one place. And I found that the collaborative aspect of writing film scores and working with directors and editors and working with stories and characters really helped me kind of synergize all of these influences and experiences I've had as a musician, a non-linear musician leading up to getting into film music. So it's fun to kind of like group it all into a big boiling pot, if you will.
Would I know any of the artists that you may have toured with?
Probably not, but they
Try
are
me.
all fantastic. Let's see, I played with a fantastic band called Walter Migo, my friend Justin, and played with a band called Evan Boitaz, who's a fantastic songwriter and producer working today still. Both of
Hmm.
them are still kicking out the jams, and I played my own band was called Pizza, which I did with dear friends from college, and I still work with one of those musicians is very frequently, and we've done a lot of co scores now at this point too. So that's been sort of a lifelong creative partnership as well.
So you mentioned punk, and then you also mentioned jazz guitar. Were
Yeah.
you hiding the jazz background and the jazz specialty when you were playing punk?
There might have been on the first round as a punk musician. I didn't know much about music, and I might have say maybe even that was more free. But I loved Rancid, and there was a bassist in Rancid
Matt Freeman.
named Matt Freeman, exactly,
Yeah.
who just had this amazing gift for music and a melodic quality of bass, kind of like Paul McCartney. And I just was like, wow, I didn't know the bass could do that. And I was that was kind of my introduction. I was like, I got to figure these things out. And I remember just sitting in my room playing this record over and over again, trying to work out these bass lines. And I just at that point I knew I had a bug. I had to just be learning all the time, and it was so much fun.
Was that the
um,
And Out Come the Wolves record that grabbed you?
That was the first one, and before that, the his work in Operation Ivy was that was like my two go-to bands for a long time when I was growing up, amongst other things too. My dad was always a good influence on me too, and was like, you should check out this Miles Davis record. This is really good, or check out Ornette Coleman, and played a lot of classical music. So of course at that age, I was trying to brush aside all of that, music. I was like, this isn't for me. This is, I don't know. It's for somebody else. It's not my music. And I came around to it later and realized that, actually all of these things are pretty exciting if you just let them in. They all have something to offer.
Was Miles Davis and what your dad played you your gateway to jazz? The reason I ask you that is because I was a
Yeah.
punk and metal person who could never stand a progressive rock song, who could never stand a song that went over 7 minutes long, that had a lot of notes. And then I heard this band called Level 42, and they kind of became my gateway to shredding in the jazz sense, which made me tolerate and learn to love jazz. So it was entirely your father's push?
Yeah, I think it was one of those things that it was just on so much that it was just part of the tapestry of my existence. Every meal had something playing, and he's just a great jazz lover and a classical music lover. So it was probably one of those two things, and he had his picks and in that those genres that would be familiar. Like I could probably sing you a lot of Waltz for Debbie by Bill Evans, or classic jazz records that just would play at dinner, and they're just kind of burned into my brain. And at some point it came back around where I was less of a contrarian, like I must reject everything else, and I started kind of hearing it, I think, for the first time, but it was on my terms.
Yeah.
And so I'm so grateful to my dad for introducing me to these things so that I could kind of have a context for it, and then later, get into it and then go into spaces that he didn't listen to. I got really into Alice Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders, and I
Hmm.
didn't know much about them from him per se, but I'm glad that I listened to the music that I did with him so that I could, kind of be able to take these next steps into the more exciting, for me, exciting echelons of jazz or any
Gotcha.
music for that matter. I mean, it could be anything we could be talking about. That's the
And
fun part.
and then in a different direction, something I'm curious about is having done so many episodes, or do you call them episodes? Is that a fair way to
Yeah.
call it? Because it's so intense. Okay. So
Yeah.
many pieces and episodes of Chef's Table. Did you know anything about food before you did it, or did you really have to learn?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have always been a food lover. That's my sort of my answer is I mean, it's just fun. And I think music and food have a lot in common in that they're like really good door gateways to other cultures,
Hmm.
and in a way that you could really get into the richness and the depths of a new place without having to know a language or have to go through an abstract process. You could just eat a bowl of tom yum or try something that you've never tried at Oaxacan cuisine or anything, and it's just an instant like, wow, I mean, this is rich, this is amazing, these flavors pop out of the texture or whatever it is. It just transports you in a way to something maybe nostalgic or something new. And I think music similarly does this exact same thing to your brain from
Hmm.
a different angle. It's a different sensory experience, but it's very much the same thing where we are just anybody can listen to something and get like thrown into the deep end. If you put on gamelan music, it's just like,
Hmm.
wow, what is this? What are these rhythms and these overflowing elements of, the music that's not stacked like Western music, but it's, linear and elided, and all of these amazing things happen to your brain and it just takes you to this place. So I think Chef's Table has been kind of fun because it's allowed these love of eating and love of learning to kind of blend with music, and I'm not a great chef myself. I like cooking, but I've learned a lot from the show. To answer your question specifically, it's tremendous amounts from the show, even though I wouldn't call it a cooking show in the traditional sense. We're not sitting in front of the stove getting a step by step set of instructions, but you do learn a lot about what it means to become a great chef, and how these people all share something in common, that they're just driven and passionate and put
Right.
themselves into places that are like uncertain, and have a lot of risk, and are going other places in the world to learn techniques, and they don't know if it's going to work or it's going to pan out at any point, but they just keep going down the river. And I think that's like such uh, a, a wonderful part of being an artist in general, is that you just have to accept uncertainty at some point and just say, my
Hmm.
passion and my dedication to this process, and to expressing something, or more importantly doing work that could be meaningful to a larger context, a larger group of people, to a community, could it can drive you through all of this uncertainty. And I think that's the fun part about working on Chef's Table.
So this new or latest batch of Chef's Table is new to us. For you, is a long time in the hopper and production. But are we allowed to know what's next or where we'll hear more music from you soon?
Yeah, yeah. I am working on a very cool documentary right now about the native origins of the game lacrosse.
Hmm.
So it will be a very fun. It's the film is currently being cut, so we're sort of in the mix now, and music will start soon. But it's been a fascinating adventure for me, because I knew very little about the game lacrosse, and how deeply it's tied to Indigenous people in this country, and in Canada, and how the game has really been co-opted by forces outside of those communities. And how tragic it is, and how there's a really wonderful movement to kind of bring awareness to the history now, and to the plight of the modern Haudenosaunee people who are still playing this game as their ancestors did, not for money and for fame, but because it's a commitment to tradition and a commitment to,
Hmm.
spirituality. And so it's a very rich subject. And I have myself have learned so much just from watching the versions of the edit as they've come in. It's been fascinating.
No, no spoilers here, but is Flavor Flav in the documentary by any chance?
No, not that I'm aware of.
That
Um,
was the thing I learned of recently. Like Flavor Flav loves lacrosse. I just
oh
figured,
yes.
who would have
I'm,
thought?
you know, I'm not surprised to hear it. There have been a whole host of people who you wouldn't expect who have had this passion for the game as well, including I think Jason Momoa even at one point I learned was this of course very very a wonderful advocate for all kinds of people. So it's not a surprise to me to learn that Flavor Flav may have had that background too.
Yeah, I know what you're going to be Googling after this interview, but
Oh, definitely.
and then last question I've got for you. What's the last concert that you went to for fun?
Oh
And
gosh.
here's why I asked that while you think about that. Because when your day job is essentially music, a lot of people initially, like a kid in a candy store, then spent all day and night on music for fun. And then they realize I'm going to be burnt out if I do that forever. So then you become a non-music person. And then hopefully you come around to loving music again. Do I have that cycle
Uh,
sort of right for you?
oh yes. Oh
Okay,
yes. I mean, silence is golden. I
good.
never appreciated it more than I do now. And I always love watching a movie that has no music in it. It's always
Hmm.
just like a fascinating brain experience for me because I think there's just so much. There's so much to that, and that could be a whole other discussion. But I have had that experience, and I was just kind of flicking through my memory. In We did a couple of fun concerts. I have young children, and we brought them to a concert series in the Altadena and the East Side area. Well, I think they're all around Los Angeles. Called Feels Like Floating, and it's a bunch of different artists, and they have a really neat experience where you kind of go to a natural setting and you just sit in nature, and whether it's like a really cool art compound in the hills. There's one called Zorthian
Wow.
Ranch, or we went to a park called Hahamunga, and one very neat one. I'm going to forget the name of this artist, but I could probably find it and email it to you later, so it could be included because this artist was fascinating. He's a modular synthesist, and it was all through mushrooms. And so the mushrooms themselves can conduct electricity. So they
Hmm.
had done some local foraging in the park that we were there, and we all had headphones on and were attached to his rig. And we actually even completed a circuit at one point by everybody holding hands there and made different music because the way the electricity travels through the flowers they forage and the mushrooms is a little different. So different musical outcomes would happen. And my kids were there and they were just like, what is this? There's mushrooms and there's blinking lights and headphones. And it was a really just a lovely afternoon. And this artist is a fantastic, I think, like at breaking down the walls of kind of what you would expect an electronic ambient music concert to sound like, and that we all engaged and foraged and that created music. And it's this fascinating experience
So it all comes
altogether.
back to food and music being
Yeah, I
paired
guess
for you.
so.
Well,
I guess so. It's a theme for me.
that's the exact opposite of my last one, which was Pasadena's David Lee Roth. There was
Oh,
no
cool.
mushrooms that we know of or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the key is, Duncan, it's fascinating to see the unique path that you've forged and really looking forward to what's to come because we can't really pigeonhole what it is that you do. And that's, in my opinion, a good thing.
Well, thank you for saying that, and I appreciate that. It's a funny double-edged sword that, but I just love that my world has my musical life has brought me through all of these different phases, and I've been able to learn about so many different types of people and
Mhm.
types of cultures through the show, and how that's get provided all these interesting opportunities musically as a composer. So I'm very grateful for that. And thank you
Well,
for saying it. That's very kind of you.
Paltrocast.